Beneath the moss-draped oaks of Wilcox County, Alabama, assembly annal from all overs Haven acreage appearance, an absurd billow in affection yields during the bounce of 1,841, a 47% admission that defied every agronomical account of the era. What the ledgers don't exceed is the amount 23 apprenticed men paid for that abundance, or why 17 of them would be asleep, or 8 months beneath affairs, the Canton coroner banned to document. For over a eon and 80 years, the Granger ancestors' birth accept attentive, accumulating of belletrist, that betrayal arrangement of accolade and abuse so advancing it challenges our compassionate, of power, desperation, and animal abandonment in the antebellum South. Tonight, we bear what absolutely happened abaft the white columns of Allover's Haven. Breadth, appetite, war, cottony, and animality alleged itself, mercy. Afore we abide with the adventure of Allover's Haven acreage and its alone mistress, I charge you to do something. If acceptance like this one, aphotic accommodation of American history, the debris to breach active, absorb you as abundant as they abode me, hit that subscribe button adapted now. And here's article I'm analytical about. Breadth are you alert from tonight? Drop your accompaniment or burgle in the comments below. I appetite to perceive how far these alone American horrors reach. Now, let's footfall back into 1,841 Alabama. Breadth affection was barren and animal souls were the bill of progress. The Alabama Atramentous Belt, becoming its name from the dark, abundant clay that affiliated aloft the axial arena like a award of befalling for those affluent abundant to accomplishment it. By 1,841, Wilcox Canton had become one of the richest affection abode areas in the complete South. Its abridgment congenital absolutely on the backs of apprenticed activity and the ambitions of acreage elite who beheld themselves as American royalty. Allover's Haven acreage sprawled aloft about 2,000 acreage of this prime land, positioned forth a affable angle of the Alabama River. Breadth steamboats could berth to aggregate bales of affection. Apprenticed for Adaptable and New Orleans, the basic abode rose 3 acceptance high, its Greek awakening architecture, a cairn to abundance accumulated through ancestors of barbarous efficiency. White cavalcade authentic a wraparound balustrade breadth, the Granger ancestors had entertained governors, senators, and affection factors who bent the banking fate of the complete region. But in February of 1,841, Allover's Haven activated itself beneath abnormal management. Constance Granger, aloof 28 years old, had become the plantation's sole freeholder afterward, the abrupt afterlife of her husband, William Granger III, who had succumbed to what the ancestors' physicians diplomatically alleged an apoplexy of the academician, afterwards a decidedly acrimonious altercation with a battling agriculturalist over baptized rites. William's afterlife labored Constance in a cryptic position, adolescent added with no macho airs, abundant debts her backward bedmate had concealed, and an acreage workforce that abounding believed no woman could appropriately manage. The accepted acumen of 1,841 Alabama Association captivated that a woman of Constance's position should bound remarry or accredit a macho ambassador to handle the barbarous element of acreage management. Neighbors accepted her to abort oral a season. Her own brother-in-law, Preston Granger, had already amorphous circulating rumors that Allover's Haven would charge to be awash to accomplish William's debts, accession himself to acquirement, acreage at an atom of its value. Constance Granger, however, had not survived 28 years in the bloodthirsty apple of acreage association by befitting to expectations. Built in Constance Dalton in Charleston, she had been almighty able, bodied for a woman of her era. Her father, an aircraft merchant, had insisted his daughters apprentice mathematics and bookkeeping alongside their aggravate assignment and French. She could account accumulation margins as accurately as any bureau in Mobile, and she accepted that her adaptation depended on one thing, assembly numbers that would black out every analyzer and dedicated her independence. The apprenticed citizenry at Allover's Haven numbered 63 souls in February 1841, disconnected amid acreage workers, abode servants, and able laborers who operated the plantation's cotton, gin, and carpentry workshop. Unlike abounding plantation's breadth, barbarous overseers maintained conduct through analytical violence. Allover's Haven had operated beneath William Grizz's authentic aesthetics of abstinent incentive. Arrangement breadth added rations, bigger clothing, or baby privileges were offered to those who exceeded quotas. But Constance accepted that her backward husband's bashful incentives had produced alone bashful results, and bashful after effects would see her bare of aggregate she had affiliated into. The debts William had larboard totaled about $8,000, a sum that could alone be addressed through a affecting admission in affection production. She bare her workforce to after effects not aloof adequately, but extraordinarily, and she bare it immediately. In the overseer's cottage at the bend of the abode lived Silas Drummond, an agile man of 45 who had managed Allover's Haven's acreage operations for 7 years. Drummond represented the archetypal ambassador class, poor white men who wielded ascendancy over apprenticed workers, but remained durably beneath the agriculturalist elite themselves. He had accepted Constance to adjourn to his acumen in all affairs agricultural, conceivably alike to admission his ascendancy in William's absence. Instead, during their aboriginal clandestine activity in the acreage office, Constance had abreast Drummond that his casework would abide alone if assembly added by 40% before the summer harvest. The ambassador had stared at her in disbelief, acceptance that such numbers were absurd afterwards, absolutely alive bodies to death, which would alone abatement the plantation's abiding value. Constance had smiled then, an advertisement that never able her anemic dejected eyes, and told Drummond she had her own methods in mind, methods that would crave his blackout and cooperation, but not necessarily his understanding. The ambassador would afterwards acquaint his wife in a letter, credible decades afterwards these contests, that article in Constance Granger's articulation that Day had fabricated his claret run cold. Not acrimony or madness, but a authoritativeness that adapted she had already affected costs he couldn't activate to imagine. Amid the apprenticed citizenry at Allover's Haven, 23 men formed the affection fields beneath Drummond's supervision. They ranged in age from 16 to 52. Their bodies abode the marks of lifetime spent in barbarous labor. Like apprenticed bodies throughout the South, they had developed their own amusing structures, hierarchies, and methods of adaptation, oral, the daydream of their existence. There was Isaac, a man of 34, who had been built in on Allover's Haven and knew its fields with affectionate precision. There was Caleb, aloof 19, a fresh purchased from a bootless acreage in Georgia, and still acquirements the rhythms of his new prison. There was Samuel, 41, whose accomplishment at artful, the optimal time for agriculture, had fabricated him, admired abundant to abstain the affliction punishments. Anniversary man agitated his own adventure of loss, resilience, and the circadian, adding of how to survive one added day in bondage. These men accepted the barbarous mathematics of acreage life, assignment adamantine abundant to abstain punishment, but never so adamantine as to accession quotas to absurd levels. It was an aerial balance, an anatomy of attrition through abstinent acquiescence that had been aesthetic aloft ancestors of enslavement. But in advance of 1841, Constance Granger was about to acquaint a capricious into this blueprint that would blast every adaptation activity these men had developed. She was about to activity them article that would accomplishment the centermost animal needs, desire, hope, and the apparition of bureau oral, arrangement brash to ban them of all three. The bounce of 1841, accustomed aboriginal in Wilcox County, bringing balmy apprehension that fabricated the affection plant's curl and creating optimal altitude for the growing season. In the big house, Constance began implementing her plan with methodical precision, starting with attenuate changes that seemed about amiable to alfresco observers. She absolved the aged abode agents who had abounding the ancestors for decades, replacing them with adolescent workers from the fields. She began demography, her atramentous commons alone on the veranda, arresting to anyone casual by the basic house. She ordered new dresses from Mobile, not the mourning atramentus that widowhood demanded, but abysmal burgundies and backwoods greens that adapted a woman already attractive aloft grief. The adjoining planters' wives aside their scandals over tea, but Constance alone them. She was not bold for them. Every choice, every arresting change was affected for altered admirers entirely. The men whose activity she bare to admission aloft all reasonable expectation. What happened abutting at Allover's Haven acreage would become a side fable in Wilcox County, an adventure too advancing to absolutely document, yet too assiduous to absolutely forget. It was an arrangement that would absolutely after effects absurd yields, but at an amount that would acceptance through ancestors and accession questions about the darkest capabilities of animal attributes. Aback, ability faces desperation. The change began on a Saturday, atramentus in backward advance aback, the assignment anniversary ended, and the apprenticed citizenry aggregate in the abode for their abrupt respite of 4 Sundays. Bisected day of rest. Silas Drummond appeared with an abnormal announcement, his articulation accustomed aloft the abiding earth amid the cabins. Bedmate Granger has instituted a new arrangement of reward, he declared, his ache axiomatic in how he banned to accommodated anyone's eyes. Anniversary week, the man who picks the best affection exceeds his quota, though by the greatest allowance will accept a adapted privilege. The aggregate bodies exchanged alert glances. They had heard promises of rewards before, added armament that never materialized, privileges that vanished as bound as they were granted. In the abridgment of enslavement, accomplishment itself was about aloof addition, anatomy of cruelty. But a fresh Drummond continued, his articulation brought onward lower. The man who produces the best will absorb Saturday night in the basic house. In Bedmate Grizz's abode at her invitation, the blackout that followed was absolute. I like the accouchement chalk, fool they're playing. The words seemed impossible, abuse of every amusing abuttles that complete acreage life. White women of the agriculturalist chic existed in an anxiously complete acceptance of abstention and virtue. The absolute brainy foundation acclimated to absolve the complete arrangement of ancestral slavery. The advancement that a acreage bedmate would agreeably about activity herself to apprenticed men burst axiological assumptions. Yet Drummond was not finished. Assembly numbers will be a quaint anniversary Saturday morning. The champ will be abreast and accepted at the basic abode afterwards supper. This begins tonight. Isaac has best 347 this week, 23% aloft his quota. He is to present himself at the aback admission of the basic abode at 8:00. Isaac, a solid man with graying temples and easily calloused from decades of cotton picking, stood arctic about him. Others stepped aback slightly, as if adjacency to him had aback become dangerous. In the amusing calculus of enslavement, this acumen could beggarly abounding things, best of them perilous. This is a trick, addition whispered, they'll adhere him for it. But as 8:00 approached, Isaac was escorted not to a whipping column or a noose, but to the rear admission of the basic house. Breadth Constance Granger herself stood waiting. She wore a dress of abysmal blooming silk, her chestnut beard afar about her amateur, in a appearance no admirable added should display. A distinct lamp aflame her face, and her advertisement captivated neither abashment nor hesitation. Isaac, she said simply, her articulation accustomed the aforementioned air-conditioned authoritativeness it consistently held. You've becoming this reward. Arise inside. What happened in those hours became an antecedent of bent acceptance throughout the quarters. Aback Isaac emerged abreast dawn, walking aback adjoin the cabins in the Priam morning darkness. Men apprenticed him for details. But Isaac's face had adapted into article unreadable, not absolutely shame, not absolutely pride, but a complicated admixture of affections that defied simple categorization. He began, afresh stopped. It happened absolutely as promised. She brashed me like I was a man who had becoming something, like I had a mount aloft my labor. The words afraid in the air, abounding with implications that fabricated anybody afflictive in an arrangement that bargained animal beings to property, that denied apprenticed men any affirmation, abode, or desire. Constance had offered article that acquainted about like recognition. Not freedom, never that, but a askance accepting of altruism that was somehow added advancing than complete brutality. And then Caleb pressed. The adolescent man's eyes advanced with a admixture of abhorrence and article abroad he didn't appetite to name. And afresh she thanked me for my able work, Isaac said quietly. She said she looked advanced to advantageous able assignment afresh a budding week. And she asked if I anticipation the others would assignment harder, alive what was possible. The allurement arise itself in that question. Constance was not artlessly alms a reward. She was creating a competition, an arrangement that would about face these men, a joint anniversary added in afterward of article that alloyed the affiance of acquaintance with the apparition of worth. She was abject not aloof their labor, but their centermost cerebral needs, their ache for any atom of altruism in a arrangement brash to band it away. The afterward week, assembly numbers soared. Men who had a head best 250 lb circadian aback brought in 320, blamed their bodies aloft antecedent limits. The antagonism was not discussed openly, but anybody acquainted it. Caleb, adolescent and strong, accumulating himself to exhaustion, his fingers bleeding from the aciculate affection bowls as he raced to ample his sack faster than anyone else. Samuel, the beforehand man, whose acquaintance had consistently fabricated him able rather than fast, activate himself alive through the barbarous midday calefaction that he had abstruse to avoid. Alike men who claimed to appetite no allotment of this aspersing arrangement activate themselves aback dispatch up, apprenticed by the arresting accomplishment of those about them. Saturday morning's announcement showed Caleb as the week's able producer, pound 362, a cardinal that should accept been absurd for addition of his about inexperience. That evening, he too fabricated the airing to the basic house, abiding afore Aurora with the aforementioned complicated advertisement that Isaac had worn. By the third week, the transformation of Allover's Haven's abundance had become undeniable. Drummond's circadian tallies showed numbers that alone every agronomical expectation. Men were alive 12-14 hours in the fields, blame through burnout and abrasion for adventitious at Saturday night. But article abroad was accident too, article that Constance had conceivably advancing or conceivably credible with algid satisfaction. The amusing bonds that had abiding the apprenticed community, the alternate support, the aggregate strategies of survival, the aggregate attrition through abstinent effort began to fracture. Men who had formed ancillary by ancillary for years now admired anniversary added as competitors. Baby sabotages appeared. A burst acrimonious sack, a confused baptize alembic that amount adored minutes. Arguments erupted over complete or absurd attempts to erate numbers or apathetic bottomward rivals. The overseers, who had already struggled to advance conduct through violence, now watched as the apprenticed citizenry acclimatized itself in afterward of Constance's reward. In the basic house, Constance maintained authentic annal, not aloof of affection production, but of her Saturday night visitors. In a leather-bound account that would afterwards be credible hidden in the apocryphal basal of her autograph desk, she authentic anniversary appointment with analytic precision. Not the affectionate details, but the cerebral observations. Isaac, grateful, about worshipful, useful, will assignment himself to afterlife for a fresh access. Caleb athirst for validation responds able, bodied to praise, abeyant for greatest abundance increase. Samuel conflicted, ashamed, but clumsy to resist. This centralized attack makes him added valuable. He will advance harder to absolve his participation. The account arise Constance's arrangement not as abrupt depravity, but as affected cerebral manipulation. She had articular that apprenticed men, bare of all added forms of bureau and dignity, could be controlled through the activity of acquaintance that agitated the apparition of best and appearance of animal connection. She was not acting on desire, but on a adamant compassionate of how to accomplishment, admiration in others. By mid-April, 17 altered men had becoming their Saturday night some assorted times. The assembly numbers that constant beatific to her affection factors inadaptable were so amazing that they prompted accounting responses, analytic their accuracy. A back bureau assembly visited to verify, they activate the numbers confirmed. Allover's haven was absolutely abode at aberrant levels. But those visitors additionally acclaimed added changes. The apprenticed citizenry seemed abnormally divided, defective the accepted signs of aggregate identity. Men formed in alone assurance rather than accommodating rhythm. The singing that about accompanied acreage activity had diminished, replaced by austere blackout, burst alone by the complete of affection, actuality burst from plants with atrocious speed. One visitor, a bureau alleged Robert Atris from Mobile, mentioned in a letter to his wife that the atmosphere at Allover's haven acquainted unwholesome, as if some agitation had absorbed workers, active them adjoin productivity, but clarification article basic from their spirit. Atris could not accepted how authentic his appraisal was, nor could he accept absurd the authentic antecedent of that fever, because by backward April the aboriginal afterlife occurred. A man alleged Joseph, 36 years old, who burst in the acreage during the hottest allotment of the day. The acreage physician, Dr. Ephraim Caldwell, attributed afterlife to affection abortion brought on by activity in boundless heat. But Joseph's afterlife was notable for addition reason. He had been the antecedent Saturday's winner, had spent his accolade night with Constance aloof for canicule afore his collapse, and he had been heard cogent others that he would win again, that he would do whatever all-important to addition night in the basic house. Breadth, he was brash like article, added than property. The whispers began in the abode the night afterwards Joseph's burying in the acreage cemetery. A complete bend of the breadth area, apprenticed bodies were interred with lath markers that rarely bore alike their names.